Okay, so good morning and good in Moed. Today's daf is daf Zion in Makkot. We get to share two different prakim in Maseches Makkos this morning. First, we'll conclude the end of the first chapter, which has been dealing with Eidim Zomamin, and then we'll begin with the second chapter, which will deal with the concept of sending someone who kills somebody by accident into Galut, to one of the what are they called? Cities of refuge. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Are Miklat. And so we'll begin learning about the details, in particular, what kinds of crimes will send you to an Are Miklat. And so that's what today is covering, and we'll transition some of the topics at the end of this chapter. We'll touch on concepts in connection with murder. We're going to hear there's the one of the famous lines in the Talmud about a court that kills more frequently than a certain interval, whether that's considered a violent court. Okay, but let's take a look. We're beginning at the Mishnah, fifth line on Zion Amud Aleph. Misha Nigmar Dino Uvarach. If somebody's rule, now the reason that we're getting into this is that we have seen that if in fact that because a Eidim Zomim, a false witness that's been found to have gone and testified against somebody, even though they were with someone else at the time. If they ran away, we saw that because the monetary component of their penalty is considered a kanas, if they then ran to another court and admitted their liability, they would not be liable any longer. Because in a kanas situation, if you admit liability, you are exempt from the payment of the penalty. So Misha Nigmardino, so having talked about that in connection with an Eid Zomim or Eidim Zomamin, so as a result, we're going to now talk about it more generally. So Misha Nigmardino Uvarach Uvalafne Oto Beitin. So you ran away. The decision was made in your case, and you ran away. And then you come back to that same court and you say, listen, try my case again. I don't have any new arguments, but just maybe you'll come up with something. So Ein Sosrenes Dino. We don't reconsider, contradict their ruling. So take a look in the Rashi, second line at the top of the page. Lachzor velisa velitain ulai yizakeh. To return and go back to the back and forth over whether or not maybe this person is not guilty. So again, we're at the top of Zion Amud Aleph at the Mishnah, and highlighting the fact that if you run away and you come back to the same court, the court doesn't even consider your case. Again, you've already been found guilty or liable, and so as a result, you're going to have to make those payments. Kol makom sheyamdu shnayim v'yomru, wherever now and then a similar case. Now, instead of the person coming back to the same court, we have two witnesses come and say, we know that this other court, and we testify that this other court reached a definitive conclusion with respect to this case about this particular person. Uploni Edav. And these were the witnesses. So, assuming that this is a capital case, Hare Ze Ye Hareg. He is killed immediately. So we are going to see, the Gemara is going to highlight that there's a slight discrepancy between these two statements in what they imply. Sanhedrin, and in connection with that discrepancy, the Mishnah is going to now tell us, Sanhedrin noheges ba'aretz uv'chutz la'aretz, that there are courts of 23 that can try capital cases, both inside the land and outside the land of Israel. Sanhedrin ha-horeget echad b'shavua, when it comes to a court that kills every 7 years, nikres chovlanis. So that is considered a destructive court. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah Omer echad l'shivim shana. It's not once in every 7 years, but once in every 70 years. Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva Omrim, Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva said, Ilu hayinu b'Sanhedrin, if we were in the Sanhedrin, and of course, Rashi points out, Ilu hayinu, third line in the Rashi, v'yamim sheSanhedrin danu, if we were there in the time that the Sanhedrin would judge, dino nefashos, capital cases, lo neherag ba'adam, nobody would be killed, kedim mefarish b'Gemara, as we will explain in the Gemara. Why? Because they would check the witnesses on something where they can't possibly know. And so as a result, since they couldn't possibly know the answer, they would say, the person just is able to avoid being killed. So, but Rabbi Gamliel responds to that with the obvious answer. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, Avhein Marbin Shochi Damim b'Yisrael. If that were true, they would be creating more murderers in Israel because, of course, as Rashi points out, in Rashi, first of the narrow lines on Zion Amud Aleph, Imahayu Osin Cain, if they did this, and they did this kind of checking, and everybody was able to go free, Hayu Marbin Shochei Damim, there would be more murderers. Shalo Yira'u mi beitin, because they would not be afraid of court. They would be realizing that they would never get punished, and so as a result, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so the Gemara again notes an apparent contradiction, which at least I didn't notice originally when I read this Mishnah, but if you listen carefully, I think you'll be able to hear it, and now I am able to hear it as well. So Livnei Oto based in Hu De'ein Sotrin, right? Our Mishnah said that if somebody goes back to the same court, then they're not going to reconsider the case at all. What is the implication? Ha Livnei based in Acher, if they go to a different court, Sotrin, they would consider the same case. But Hatani Seifa, but now listen to the end of the case. Remember, the end of the case is that if two witnesses say this person was convicted in a location, well, then they would just kill the guy. There would be no retrial. So Hatani Seifa, Kol Makom Sheyamdu Shnayim V'Yomru Meidim Anu Es Ish Ploni Shenigmar Dino Beveist in Ploni Uploni Edav. 1 second. The end of our Mishnah says that a person who two witnesses say this guy was convicted in this court and these were his witnesses, and his court was some other court, he gets killed immediately. I thought you said that he will get a new trial. So how could he be getting why is that? How is this consistent? You said that he gets a new trial if he goes to a different court, and now he goes to a different court and he gets killed immediately. So that seems inconsistent. So Amar Abaye lo kashya kan be'eretz Yisrael, kan b'chutz la'aretz. So when you go to a court in the land of Israel, and that's your second court, well, then we will reconsider it. Only if you go to the same court in Israel will we say, look, yeah, you had your shot. That's it. You're done. But when it comes to a court outside the land of Israel, then the court outside the land of Israel is going to just apply the original court. Wherever that original court was, we're just going to simply apply. You have to get, you're going to get the judgment in that other case. Tanya, and we have a brisa that supports this idea.
You're saying that the court outside Eretz Israel will uphold a ruling in Eretz Israel?
No, I'm sorry, but I don't understand. The point is
that when it goes out Chutz La'aretz, if it goes Chutz La'aretz, that they would hold what was the judgment of Eretz Israel, right? That's
Well,
what
they would uphold the judgment from Eretz Yisrael or wherever the person was. But remember, we're talking about a person who's moved, right? The person has moved. And so as a result, the defendant has moved, or the convict in this case has moved, right? He's been convicted. So he's moved from a court in Israel to a court in Chutz La'aretz, or from one court in Chutz La'aretz to another court in Chutz La'aretz. In that situation, we're going to just apply the original ruling. We're not going to do any kind of reevaluation. But if, in fact, the person was in Eretz Yisrael and he went from one court in Eretz Yisrael to another court in Eretz Yisrael, or from a court in Chutz La'aretz to a court in Eretz Yisrael, well, then if the person, so then we would reevaluate and reconsider the case. And we're going to see why in just a moment.
Well, the question is, Dina de Machuta, Dina de Machuta, Dina, if a person goes from Eretz Yisrael to Chutzar, why are they bound by their laws?
Because we're talking about a capital case, and in a capital case, there is no Dina de Machusa. The person is convicted of murder. We're not talking about Dina de Machusa.
Okay.
Okay. So Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Dosdai, Ben Yudosdai, Omer, Bishum Rabbi Shimon ben Shetach. So what did he say in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Shetach? Baruch Meretz Israel Chutzaretz. You run from the land of Israel to outside the lands of Israel. Ein Sosrenes Dino. There's no reevaluation. You will just apply the same sentence. B'chutz la'aretz la'aretz. But if you go from outside the land of Israel to the land of Israel, Sosrenes Dino, then you would reevaluate because of the merit that's associated with Eretz Yisrael. Now, if we were to limit this, there's a machlokas among Rishonim whether or not we limit this statement just to the cases that a Rabbi Yehuda ben Dostai is said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Shetach, or all that we care about is the destination court. If we limit it to the statement of Rabbi Yehuda ben Dostai in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Shetach, well, then we can apply a principle that we saw, I think it was in Sanhedrin, where we said that the air of Eretz Yisrael helps our intelligence. And so if that's the case, well, then one can understand that, and Rashi says, Mipnei Zechuza shel Eretz Yisrael, Ulai to'il limtzo lo Pesach shel Zechus. Maybe they will be able to find some kind of opening to acquit. And so as a result, that's going to be the reason why in Eretz Yisrael we will allow the court to reevaluate, but outside the land of Israel, we will not.
And they don't have intelligent judges outside of Israel that would allow reevaluation? I mean, it's the same.
They don't have the benefit of being in the land of Israel. So as a result, that they're going to just simply apply the law. There's no special credit that we're going to give for
But as you said before, it's a murder case. It's capital case. There's no dina de machuta dina. Why would there be any change from one locale to another? That's what you said before, right?
Right. Yes, it's a dina. It's not a dina de machusa dina because
but it's capital
case. So I don't understand the question.
So it's murder. Murder is murder. So why is there an opportunity to reevaluate? It's the soter the din in one
right,
locale, but not another.
In the land of Israel, well, you can either say it's based on the fact that the land we want to try and encourage people to be in the land of Israel, and so as a result, we want to, we'll reconsider a case in the land of Israel. Or the point is that the judges in the land of Israel have the benefit of the air of the land of Israel. And so as a result, they may be able to think of a reason why this person should be exonerated, he should be acquitted, even though he was convicted in outside the land of Israel. They may be able to come up with something that the people outside the land of Israel were not able to come up with. That's the bottom line in the Gemara.
I think that's in Bava Batra, where it says Eretz Yisrael Machkim.
Yeah. That again, I don't remember. It's felt more recent than that, so that's why. But yes, exactly. Eretz Yisrael Machkim. That's exactly the language, but it could have been that we saw it in Bava Basra. Okay, so Sanhedrin no heges. So we say that the Sanhedrin applies both inside the land of Israel and outside. How do we know that? The Tana Rabbanan v'hayu elu lachem l'chukat mishpat l'dorosechem. That these will be for you the laws of judgment for your generations, and most specifically, that pasuk continues, b'chol moshvosechem, in all of your dwelling places. That shows that we have to have courts both in the land of Israel and outside if we have communities outside the land of Israel. Well, then what does it mean in your gates? Your gates generally means in the land of Israel. So bisharecha atamoshiv bate dinim b'chol pelech upelech ub'chol ir be'ir. In your land, in your gates, in the land of Israel. So then you have to have courts in every region and every city. But when it comes to outside the land of Israel, you only need to have courts in every general area, in every state, so to speak, or county. And you don't need to have one in every city. So that's the difference between Sanhedrin in the in Israel and outside. So Sanhedrin hahoreg, yes. So then we talked about what would be considered a murderous or a violent court. So we bailahu akas l'shivim shana nikris kovlanis o dilma orach arahi, meaning when we said that you have to that it has to be at least 1 in 70 for it to be a destroying court, is it more than 1 in 70? Or is it, or even 1 in 70 itself would be problematic? So Teku, that there's no answer to that question. So Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Akiva, Omrim Ilu Hayinu, Hechi Avu Avdi. What would they do? Meaning, how in the world would they come up with a way to try and free the person? So Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar, Da'amri Tarbayu, Re'isim Treifa Harag, Shalom Harag. Can you tell us whether the murder victim was somebody who was going to die within the year? Did he have any of the various health conditions that would make him likely to die within that year? And so as a result, if not, well, then if you don't know the answer to that, maybe this person was a treifa, and therefore the person should not be convicted. So Amar Rav Ashi, Imtim Salom or Shalom Haba, and if you want to say that maybe he was complete because they came in and they and as Rashi says, take a look at Rashi, Imtim Solomar Shalom Harag. And if you want to say that the person was complete, Sheyomru bidaknuhu la'achar misaso, that we checked him after he died, Mikol Shmona Esrei Trefot, from every kind of the 18 different kinds of forms of Trefot, and we checked and we confirmed that he doesn't have any of them. So Dilma b'makom sayiv nakav lahava. Maybe it was at that particular, the place where the sword went into his body, that was where the treifa was. And so as a result, it killed him, but it also hid the location of where he would have been a treifa. So bevoel es
able to, but I mean, we have a prohibition against autopsy. So how are they able to check him like this?
They obviously violated that prohibition. Or the murder was so violent that they were able to use the murderer's actions in order to engage in the autopsy. So that only covers us with murder. Of course, it doesn't cover us with every kind of murder. What if the person used some kind of poison? So bevoel es ha'erva hechi havu avdi. What would they do in connection with adultery? So Abaye v'Rava da'amri tarbayu re'isem kimchol b'shfoferes. Did you see the act itself? And the Gemara uses a clean language of the idea of a sort of a makeup applicator into a tube, that would be referencing the act of relations itself. So as a result, and usually you don't actually see that, and so as a result, again, the person would be able to get off. Well, 1 second. If that's a question that could be asked, how is it possible for the rabbis to sentence anybody to death? Yeah. As Rashi says, "Rabbanan demachayvi misa al ha'erba hechi daini be'ezo edus heim horgin hoel v'lav ha'chibadki." If you're not checking this fact, well then, what exactly are you asking the witnesses? So Kishmuel, it's like Shmuel to Amar Shmuel, b'mina'afim sheyera'u kimina'afim. When it comes to people who are having an adulterous affair, Does it look like they're having an adulterous affair? If it looks like they're engaged in that kind of action, so then we will come to that conclusion. So Tosfos asks us a question that is an interesting question. It's worth taking a look at. So, sorry, go ahead. You have a question?
I want to say, but the whole Gemara and Sota, it brings about the discussion of Noef and Noefa, right? You bring the person to the court, she has to drink and so forth. So yeah, he has to. There's some act of jealousy, and they have to be witnesses, but they don't actually have to see the Misa itself.
Well, no. Remember, when it comes to Sota, the act itself is seclusion.
Correct.
It's
correct.
not. It's not the act of relations.
Correct.
But now we are not talking about Sota. We're talking about somebody who had an adulterous affair, and such a person is only liable for actually engaging in the act itself. And so the question that the Gemara is asking is, if you're not asking the witnesses whether or not there was penetration, so how and what exactly are you asking? And so that's where Shmuel comes and says, no, as long as it looks like they were engaging in that act, so then that's going to be sufficient.
Well, I say it's Doma de Sota because in a sense, the seclusion serves as a basis. They're not actually seeing the act there either. It's not exactly the same. I understand that, but it makes me think of that.
I hear that. I hear that. But again, the big difference is that obviously what you're highlighting, and maybe this is your point, which is that when it comes to a sota, the thing that you're seeing represents something more than what you're seeing. And so too here, Shmuel's ruling is saying that the act that you're seeing represents something more. And if that's what your point is, then
basically, yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look at this Tosfos Kimchol Bishfoferes Tema. He asks the question: Oved Avodah Zara. How about a worshiper of idols? How are Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon going to get off somebody who is worshiping an idol? Umachal Shabbos. And when it comes to somebody who violates Shabbos, my ikalamemer, dahazam lo matzina lemiftarei. There, it doesn't seem like it's so easy to cause something to be not, to exempt the guy. V'ha hechi ka'amar lo haya adam nerag. How is it possible that he could say that nobody would be killed, may olam, that nobody would ever be killed? And so as a result, so v'yesh lomar, de mikom makom ka'amar shapir, lo haya adam nerag mishum de lo shrichi kulahai. Nah, idol worshiping and violating of Shabbos, that's not so common. Ki'im birotzeach va'arayos. It's only the ones that are more common. This is a scary thought among the Jewish people. It was murder and relations. So that's one possible answer. But that obviously doesn't sit so well with Tosfos. Maybe you could say, Re'itim shemechalel eino treifa. Are you sure that the person himself who did the action was not a treifa? Because the imhu treifa, because if the person who did the act was a treifa, im kain, im taziman, lo yu chayavin misa, mishum dematzu lemeimer gavra katila be'inan lemikdal. Because if in fact the person was a treifa, well then you would not be able to make these witnesses Edim Zomamin, because they could say that they were trying to kill somebody who is effectively already dead. And now, all of a sudden, this is testimony that can't be contradicted, as we saw in Sanhedrin. And because it can't be contradicted, now it's going to be considered invalid testimony, and therefore the testimony is thrown out and the accused is acquitted. So as a result, that is a method of effectively, according to Tosfos, effectively getting out of any particular case if the court were to ask that question. Okay.
We have a suffix on the
on the treifa status of
Yeah, and the staff
the
is the
accused.
mihucha, so the person, but that could always be the case, right? If anything,
Yes,
the
yes,
person
that's
did.
exactly right, and that's what Tosos is offering this as. Now, the question is, why didn't the Gemara offer this as the answer? But the bottom line is that Tosos is highlighting that there's an issue in our Gemara, which is there are other capital cases where it seems like it would be very hard to get the person off. Okay. And
And I
yet,
think it would be a little,
nonetheless, Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva say that they were going to do it. So
I
now
mean,
we,
I think it would be a little more obvious. You see someone worshiping in front of an idol, bowing down. You're not
well,
seeing an
that's
act. You're not seeing adulterous act, but you are seeing someone saying there's an idol in the middle of the road and he bows down to it. I mean,
yes, I know. That's why Tosfos asked this question, and Tosfos answers either that because it's not a common thing that Jews don't generally bow down to idols, or we're going to say that it's because Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva would ask the witnesses, can you tell whether this person, the accused, is a shalom or a treifa? And if you can't tell, well, maybe he's a treifa, and that would mean that your edut is edut she'iyata yachol hazima, and therefore your testimony needs to be thrown out, and that would be the basis to try and acquit everybody. So again, it's not clear that actually that would be a valid basis, because again, in the end, right, we remember that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, yeah, you're going to create a whole murderous society if you do that. Okay. Now having talked a little bit about murder is a perfect transition to the second chapter. The second chapter deals with accidental murder in general, or what the line is between accidental and intentional murder. And we're going to see that there are a number of there's a spectrum of actions, all the way, of course, on one extreme being one for which you are chayav misa. And at the other extreme is actually you are so not responsible that you are actually exempt from any liability. And in the middle, we can have a situation where you're sufficiently responsible that we're not going to allow you to be exiled, but not so responsible as to kill you. And then we have the case where you are going to be exiled, and then again the case at the far extreme where we're going to say you're so your action is so unintentional. Thank you, that's exactly the word I was looking for. Unintentional, that we will allow you to go free. So Elu Heina Golin, these are the ones who are going to get sent to the Galos. Hahoreg nefesh bishgaga. If you killed somebody in unintentionally, so inadvertently. So haya ma'agel b'magila. If you were rolling a roller. Now, what kind of roller is this? So Rashi tells us haya ma'agel b'magila. Tochen hayu gagosehen betit. They would grind plaster onto their roofs. V'hagagot lo hayu mishupayin. And their rooftop itself would not, in fact, be in any way slanted, but you need to make it slanted so that the rain runs off. So aval hatit mishpayin ma'at kadeshi azovu hamayim, right? But the roof covering that they would use with the plaster would be slightly sloped so the water would run off. And you would take this thick piece of wood, and you put on that thick piece of wood, a heavy piece of wood, a handle, and you would push it down the slope. Again, there's a very slight slope from the plaster itself, and you would push it down the slope, and then letzad hashipua, v'chozer umoshcha alap, and then you would pull it back to yourself. V'chozer v'dochva, and then you'd push it again. V'ahit mitamerach, and then it mitmareyach, the plaster would spread umachalik and smooth out. So again, it's like a roller that you see for cement on the street, but a much smaller version that a person could do his own. So, and when he's pushing korehu ma'agal, that's called rolling. So, and when he's pulling, korehu moshech, then he's called pulling. V'shem ha'etz ma'agila, and the name of that piece of wood is a ma'agila. So that's the situation. So you're pushing slightly down a slant, v'nafla alav, and it all falls out of his hands, v'haragato, and it kills somebody. So if he's pushing it down the slope, that's going to cause him to be liable for exile. If he was lowering a cask, v'nafla alab v'haragato, and it fell on somebody and killed them, yored b'sulam v'nafal alab v'haragato. And if he was climbing down a ladder and he fell, of course, it's not completely clear exactly what fell in that case, but he fell and killed somebody. Hareze gola. In all three of these cases, he is exiled. Abal im haya moshech b'magila. If he was pulling the roller and the roller just fell off the handle and then slid down and fell onto somebody, that's case number one. V'nafla ala b'haragato hayadola b'chavis, or he was raising the cask, and the cask, even though he was trying to lift it, it came down and fell on somebody. The nifsak achevel, and the rope broke. The nafla ala b'haragato, and now it fell on somebody and killed them. Haya ola besulam, or if he was climbing up the ladder, the nafal ala b'harago, and he fell and he killed somebody. Hareze einagola. These are more or less liable, less intentional, and as a result, he's not even going to get exiled. Zeklal. Here's the general rule. Kol shebederach yerida. So, and we're now on the Zion Mabet. Anytime it's going down, so then go left. The shalo bederach yerida. So, and when it's not going down, eino go left. The implication, incidentally, seems to be that when it's flat, then you're not going to go to Gullus, because that's what we just said. So it doesn't have to be up. As long as it's flat, you're going to not go to Gullus. So minahani mili, how do I know this? So Amar Shmuel, Amar Krav, Yapel alav vayamot. The pasuk says, there's a pasuk in Bamidbar, Perek Lamed Hey, pasuk Kaf Gimel, that if the person fell on him and died, or he caused the thing that whatever it is that fell on him and died, so ad sheyipol derech nefila. So the falling has to be in the natural way of action. And so as a result, as long as there's a downward motion, so then you're going to be liable. So Tana Rabbanan. Now, again, the downward motion is not the object that kills, but it's the effort engaged with that object. So that is why when you are climbing the ladder, even though you're going up, when you fall, obviously you fell and you fall on the person, that's a falling action, but you were climbing. And so as a result, your efforts were not in a downward motion, your efforts were in an upward motion. And similarly in the other cases as well, right? Meaning with the big barrel, you were lifting it up. Obviously it then broke the rope and the barrel itself fell, but your actions in connection with it were in the pulling up direction. So Tana Rabbanan. So now we're going to look at several different words that are in different psukim. The word bishkaga is in pasuk Yud Aleph and Tesvav in Perek Lamed Hey of Bamidbar, and then we're going to look at bivli das, which is the word in Perek Yud Tet pasuk Dalet in Dvarim, and we're trying to understand. These are several psukim that talk about when you are not going to be liable, what it is that is excluded. So Tana Rabbanan. Bishgaga, when you do it unintentionally, inadvertently, frat lemezit, it comes to exclude somebody who does it intentionally. Bivli das, if you do it without being aware, frat lemiskaven, well then it comes to exclude somebody who's doing it intentionally. Now, a Gemara is going to now ask, I don't understand. This is kind of obvious because we know that this is all talking about a shogeg case. So why do you need to exclude cases that are intentional? So mezid pshita, bar katalahu, the person is a murderer and he should be executed. So Amarava, Ema prat la omer mutter. No, when we say lemezid, we don't mean a true mazid, but one who thinks that the action is permitted. And so as a result, he thinks that in this particular instance, he's allowed to do whatever, defend himself, do anything that's particular, and thereby kill the guy. And he's wrong. He's not allowed to. And so, in second, so Amar le Abaye, I Omer mutar anasu. Well, in second, if he says that he thought it was permitted, well, then this is considered an anus situation. He should not be liable at all. As Rashi says, second line at the top of the daf on Zion and Mabet, anasu vehechu koreu mezid. Why in the world would we use a language of mazid for Omer Mutter when that person is actually being treated as if he's totally unintentional? So Amar le shiny Omer, I'm sorry, Amar le shani Omer, because I say ha-Omer Mutter karov lemezid who, that because actually ha-Omer Mutter, somebody who says that it's actually permitted, that is really close to being a deliberate murderer. And so as a result, it is appropriate to use the language of mazid in that situation. Okay, so what about bivli das prat miskavin? Miskavin pshita. Again, it's obvious that if you kill somebody intentionally, you're subject to your murder charges. Bar katalu, he should be executed. So amaraba prat miskavin laharog es behema v'harag es adam. No, what we're excluding is the following. If I try to shoot this animal, this, I'll be, inappropriate in some ways. The horse, it needs to be put out of his misery. And so I'm pulling the gun, about to shoot the horse in the head. And the horse just bucks out of the way, and I shoot somebody instead. Right. So in that situation, my intentions was to kill somebody. And so as a result, lechuti v'harag as Yisrael, or if I try to kill a non-Jew and I kill a Jew instead, l'nefil v'harag ben kayam, or I try to kill somebody who is is not yet reached the age that we know that the person is going to survive to adulthood or to past infancy. So a non-viable infant in all of these situations. So when given that he had that intention, he is not going to get exiled. He's not subject to murder charges either. Right. And not going to be executed. Careless. But he was so careless as to highlight that middle category, because again, we gave 4 different categories.
He's in that category.
And so he's in that category of being so liable that he's going to get that he's not getting killed, but he's also not going into gullus.
So we're going to get to what happens to that particular type of
case. The question is...
It has to be some kind of fine or punishment.
Well, so the good news is that person has to pay for his damage.
Well, okay,
he's fully liable for all the damages that are associated with it. But it's not so satisfactory, I'll admit. Okay, so now we do another brisa that analyzes the pasuk. This is a pasuk.
How do you protect that individual? In the case of where if it's a shogeg, he goes to Ir Miklat, right? Because he's protected until the Kohen dies and so forth. This person is still in the free, so the family could seek revenge, right?
They could. Obviously, it's not. It's a good question. I don't. The question was, what about the family that wants to seek revenge? Do they have the right to seek revenge in this case? To be a Goel Hadam? There's a blood avenger is the simple translation.
For unintentional
unintentional
killing.
For the killings where you go to Galus,
right?
You are there. What you are doing is saving the person from the Goel Adam by sending him to Galus. The Goel Adam is going to be allowed to kill the person, and so the question that Kenneth is rightly asking: what about this guy? Who, again, I was aiming at the horse and I killed the person. Right. I'm not going to Gullus. Can that person's family try to kill me? It certainly seems like the answer may be yes, but I don't know. I don't know for sure. We haven't yet, come to that. So I'm not 100% sure. Let me think about it, and maybe I'll ask about it and see if I can come up with something, God willing, tomorrow. Okay, so so now we're again citing another verse. This is Parak Lamed Hey Pasuk Kaf Bet in Bamidbar Tanu Rabbanan. Im befesa, when it comes to the words, the pasuk says ve'im befesa below eva hadafo o hishlich alav kol kli below tzdiya. But if suddenly, without malice, he pushed him, or he threw any implement upon him without ambush, meaning he wasn't trying to kill the guy, that's the situation where the person is going to go to Gullus. So now we're going to learn from that pasuk a variety of rules. So im befesa prat lekeren zavis. So the situation of suddenly that the person you can't have a long time negligence, meaning if you are going around a corner and the person has a knife in his hand. So let's take a look in Rashi. Befesa prat lekeren zavis shaloshon pesa hu besamach, that we're dealing with somebody who is in close proximity. Kedemetargamin b'takif prat lekeren zavis, and so it comes to exclude the corner situation. Somebody's coming out of an alleyway, v'nichnas lezeh, and he's going into another. Lifnos liyamin o l'smol, and he's going to turn right or left. V'sakinu biyado, and he's got a knife in his hand. V'zeh ba k'negdo, and this other person is coming towards him from the other side of the corner, and he can't see him. The Karen Zabis, when it comes to a corner, the low ra'u v'hargo, and he comes in and they bang into each other, and the guy killed him. So that kind of action is, there are two ways of reading it. Either because it's clear that you're not liable for gullus because of that's what we're coming to exclude. So the question is it not liable for gullus because it's so unintentional that we're going to say that they're totally exempt? Or is it actually more like the middle case of where I aim for this guy and I instead kill that guy, aim for this horse and I instead kill the person? So that's so liable, so negligent that we're not going to allow me to go to gullus. My sense is that it's the latter of those cases. It's the case where it's you're so liable, therefore we're not going to say that you're going to go to gullus, even if we won't also say that you're actually subject to the death penalty. Below Ava,
what's his penalty?
What?
He's more liable than he's not allowed to go to galut because he's really liable. So then is he
correct?
So what's his penalty? Does he get malchus?
Well, he's going to have to pay damages. We're going to see that in a moment. Below Ava, and that was essentially Stan's question a few moments ago. We do end up with an odd situation where somebody who is more liable seems to get off better than somebody who is less liable. So below Ava, there was no enemy. He was not his enemy, animosity. Prat l'sone, so that comes to exclude a situation where the person was his enemy. Hadafo, he pushed him. Shedachafo begufo, that meaning that it talks about that included in the situations where you would go to gullus is if you push the person with his body. Oh, hishlich alav, or he threw anything on him. Lahavi yerida shehit sorech. And that comes to include, we already saw nofel. So what does this tell us? That when you throw something on the person, the point is that even a downward motion, which is for an upward motion. Well, what is that? What's an example of a downward motion? Well, if I take if I'm trying to hit this tile and I take a bat and I give myself, I do a backswing. Well, my backswing, because I'm swinging up, is swinging down. Well, now if on my downswing somebody was crawling by and I hit them and kill them, well, then that's still going to send me into gullus. Okay, belotzdiya, without any ambush. Problem is if I am shooting in this direction, if I think of a bow and arrow is a great example, right? If I have a bow and arrow, and I, instead of letting go of the string, I let go of the bow, and the arrow goes backwards instead of forwards, and God forbid kills somebody, So that's a situation where, again, I am more liable than Gullus, but not liable enough to be convicted for the death penalty. Okay, another pasuk. This is a pasuk in Shmot Kaf Aleph pasuk Yud Gimel. Ba'asher lo tzada, that one who did not, it was not trying to ambush the person. So again, it comes to exclude somebody who's trying to throw. They were trying to throw the rock, only as far as the. Well, here's a good example. You can imagine this, right? The person's throwing a football, right? And he's trying to throw to the guy who's the receiver. But these quarterbacks have such velocity in their arms that it could go much further. And so he's trying to throw the ball 10 yards down the field, but instead he throws the ball 30 yards, and it turns out that there was somebody walking across, hits him in the head, little old lady, hits her in the head, God forbid, and kills her. Exactly. So that also is going to be too responsible for Gullus and not responsible enough for the death penalty. Okay. Or if somebody comes into the forest. So why is it say what's important about the forest? Both parties have the permission to be there. So as a result, it has to be a place where both parties have permission to be there. Now, the question is what happens if the perpetrator doesn't have permission? So that's a different case. We're going to have to get to that. But it's clear that if the victim doesn't have permission to be there, well, then now that's a case that is so not liable, because why would you expect the person to be there? And so because he doesn't have permission. So as a result, that's going to be the far extreme case of an ones. Therefore, he's not going to be liable. Mm-hmm. So, Baimine Rabbi Abahu me Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Abahu asked Rabbi Yochanan, Haya Ola Bisulam, if you're going up a ladder, the Nishmat Hashliva, and what falls is the rung, mitachtav, the nafla v'harga mahu. So the rung slips out, falls down, and it fall. No, you don't fall. You thankfully you caught all yourself.
You're a rung above the rung.
Yeah, exactly. You land on the next rung, the rung holds, but the rung that fell comes down, and it somehow turns, and it's like a spear, and it comes right into somebody and kills them. So in that situation, v'nishmat hashliva mitachtav v'nafla v'hargu mahu. What's the story if that rung comes out and it falls and kills somebody? Kiyakai gamna aliyahi o yeridahi. Is that an upward motion because the guy was climbing? Right. Or is it a downward motion because of the pressure that the person was putting on that rung? So that's the question. So Amar le kavar nagata birida shehi tzorich la'aliyah. Well, we have already seen that any downward motion for an upward motion is going to make you liable. And so as a result, if there is downward pressure on that rung, even though you're climbing, that downward pressure is going to potentially make you liable, because that downward pressure is to help you go up, but it's downward pressure. And so therefore, you're going to be liable for a downward motion. Well, 1 second. So so Esve, 1 second. It seems like our Mishnah might contradict this. Ze'aklal kol shebederach yiridaso gola, shelo bederach yiridaso eno gola, shelo bederach yiridaso la'atuye mai. We have a general principle in our Mishnah. We have a general principle that if it's going down, you're going to be liable, and if you're not going down, you're not going to be liable to go to Gullus. So what are we trying to include when we say a motion that's not going down? Isn't it in order to include this case where you're climbing, but the thing goes down? Isn't that the case that we're talking about? No. Rabbi Yochanan responds, but we have two general rules in our Mishnah. We had the first general rule, which says that every downward motion is going to cause somebody to go to exile. What's that including? So if you want to say that the second of our general rules is talking about this case, well, then so should the first of the general rules. So so what our Mishnah is actually telling us about is the case of a butcher or a cutter. So hakinami latuye katsav. And in every case of our Mishnah, in both the general downward and the general upward, we're including we're talking about a butcher, Titania, and we have a brisa that helps us understand it. Katsav shahaya mekatsev. You have a butcher who's chopping, or a wood chopper who's chopping. Tanachada lefano chayev v'la'acharav pater. We have one brisa that says if it's in front, then you're going to be liable. If it's behind, then you're going to be exempt. V'tanya idach la'acharav chayev lefano pater. And we have another brisa that says the exact opposite. If it's behind, you're going to be liable, and if it's in front, you're going to be pater. And Tanya Idach, we've got another brisa. Bein lefanav, bein la'acharav chayev. You're chayev whether the person that gets chopped is in front of you or behind you. But Tanya Idach, and we got a fourth brisa. Bein lefanav, bein la'acharav pater. Whether it's before, in front of you or behind, you are going to be exempt. So we've got all the different possibilities. All the different possibilities. So how in the world are we going to explain all these possibilities? The low kasha. There is no contradiction. All of these four brisas are consistent with one another. And because here's the story. Kan birida shalafana v'aliyah shalacharav. When we say that you're liable for in front of you, but not behind you. So we're dealing with a situation where the person is taking the axe from behind them, lifting it up, and putting them, and then smashing it down. And so as a result, that act behind the person is an upward motion.
Right.
That person's not liable for that motion.
Downward.
And then downward motion at the end. So therefore, he is liable for that motion. So that's going to be the first brisa. Khan, the second brisa, ba'aliyah shalafanav yiverida shalacharav. The second brisa is dealing with a situation where I've got the axe right now in front of me, and I'm going to now do my backswing in order for it to be, in order to generate the power for the front swing. And so if in my backswing, the person gets caught, well, then if the person's in front of me, I'm not going to be liable because I'm going up in front of me and I'm going down behind me. So if the person was behind me, I would be liable. So that's the situation in that situation. And then kan biridash lafanav vishalachrav. And so when we say that you're going to be liable both in front and behind, that's when I'm either going down in front or I'm going down behind. But I'm not yet, there's no upswing involved. So therefore, that's why I'm going to be liable in both situations. And kan, and the last situation where you're not liable at all, well, that's talking about the portion of the swing and the backswing where I'm going up. And if I'm going up, I'm not going to be liable. So, lema katanai, maybe we can say that there is that all of this corresponds to a machlokas tanaim, that in fact, when Rabbi Yochanan says that that when you push down on the ladder and the rung falls out and kill somebody, that you're going to be liable to go to galus, that is a topic that was a machlokas among Tanaim. Haya'ola besulam v'nishmita shuliva mitachtav. If you're going up a ladder and a rung comes out from below you, so then, and kill somebody, so then tanichada, we have one brisa that says chayev, v'tanya idach pater. We have another brisa that says pater. So the easy way to understand this is that that's a machlokas, and we're arguing about the case that Rabbi Abahu asked to Rabbi Yochanan. So, my la bahok mifligi, isn't that what they argue about? Demar savar yeridahi, that one says that the downward motion of putting your foot down on the rung is considered a downward motion that makes you liable for going to gullus if that rung comes out and kills somebody. Umar savar aliyahi, and the other one says, no, you're going up, and so as a result, you're not going to be liable. No, we don't need to say that. We can actually say that these two brises are consistent. And what's the consistency? To kuli alma aliyahi. Everybody understands that the person is going up. V'lo kasha, and there's not a question about at all. Kan lenazikin, kan legalos. That one is talking about, are you going to be liable for damages that you cause to the person who gets hit with the rung? And that's the situation. Kan legalos. And the other one is saying, no, you're not going to be liable for gullus. So ibayasema, or we could say hava hala gullus, that actually both brises are talking about gullus. V'lo kasha had asliya, v'had lo asliya. One is a situation where the worm ate up the damaged the wood of the joint. And so what happens when you step on a ladder on a damaged rug? It will naturally go down. Even if it holds for you, it will naturally go down a little bit. And that down a little bit is enough of a down so that that's going to make you liable. Whereas the rung that does not have the worm-eaten damage, the termite damage, so in that situation, the rung will hold, and as a result, it will not move, and therefore you're not going to be liable to go to gullus. Or haduloisliya, and one is where it's not, again, where it's not worm-eaten. So the ibayasema, hava haludulo asliya, both cases are where it's not worm-eaten, and the lo kasha, hadamihadik, the hadulo mihadik. The question is how well made is the ladder? If the ladder is really well made, so then the posts that make up the rungs of the ladder are going to be very reliable and fixed. And when you put your foot on it, it doesn't move at all, right? And when I go up a ladder in my house, right? Well, no. When we go up, when I think about going up a ladder,
but I don't want you to go up and
yes.
gutters.
No. That there's no the movement. The rungs are fixed. I don't go up more than 3 steps, but there's no movement. And so as a result, that kind of rung, if I'm going up that and one of the rungs were to, God forbid, crack and fall and then kill somebody, so I would not be liable because the rung itself is generally strong enough for me to not move the rung at all. And so as a result, there is no downward motion until the breakage. And as a result, I am only moving up. The lo mahadik. And the other ruling, when we say that there is liability and you are going to go to gullus, is when the rung is not fixed well into the ladder. And therefore, as soon as you put your foot on the rung, it moves and it moves downward a little bit. And therefore, it's a downward motion. And we're going to say that you are going to be liable.
But the maker of the ladder should go to gullus.
Yes, I hear that very much. Of course, we don't know in whose property the problem happened, and whether, and maybe the person himself, in those days made the ladder himself.
That's correct.
But that brings us to the next Mishnah, and for that, please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. This is a fun Masechah with lots of interesting cases.
There's a lot of common sense to it too.
100%. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Be well.
Good moed.